Time is against Putin. Economic pressure grows. Trump offers Putin favorable war-ending terms. Energy ceasefire. Is Russia following it? Peace talks without the US? What territorial terms will Moscow accept? Full story in the report. Time is starting to work against Putin. The conditions Trump is offering to end the war might be the most favorable for the Russian dictator in 4 years. Yet the Kremlin boss is still holding on to his maximalist demands. That's the picture Bloomberg journalists paint today. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has less and less time to reach a peace deal in Ukraine as the Kremlin struggles with the growing budget shortfall to finance the war. According to Bloomberg sources, Russian officials are worried this year's budget spending could exceed planned levels if additional war costs are needed. Meanwhile, new talks are expected in Miami on Saturday, January 31st, between Kremlin envoy Kirill Dmitriev and US officials. Moscow is trying to find a revenue sources of 1.2 trillion rubles, about $16 billion, to balance a key budget target. That equals an extra 0.5% of GDP on top of the planned deficit of 1.6% as energy revenues fall and unexpectedly strong ruble weighs on income. Economic pressure is mounting while the administration of US President Donald Trump seeks ways to halt Russia's full-scale invasion. Yet Putin shows no signs of giving up its maximalist territorial demands in eastern Ukraine, even as American and Ukrainian officials express cautious optimism about progress in talks to end Europe's largest war since World War II. Bloomberg sources say Moscow sees little chance of breakthrough in peace negotiations. While Ukrainian and Russian military delegations are clarifying technical details for any potential ceasefire, territorial disputes require political decisions at the highest levels. The main sticking point remains territory, confirmed this week by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The US political calendar could also be a factor for the Kremlin as Trump increasingly focuses on the November midterm elections, notes analyst Alexander Gabuev of the Berlin Carnegie Center. Russia's budget situation may worsen further as US sanctions force oil producers to lower already low prices. The 2026 budget assumes oil and gas revenues of 8.9 trillion rubles based on Ural crude at $59 a barrel and a ruble-dollar rate at 92.2. Currently, Ural trades at $55 a barrel and the ruble is around 75 per dollar. If these levels hold, oil and gas revenues would fall to 6.75 trillion rubles, creating a deficit of nearly 2.2 trillion rubles, Bloomberg calculates. Although Russia's planned budget deficit for this year is low by international standards, the government sharply revised its target last year from 0.5% to 2.6% of GDP and in December had to cut spending drastically to meet it. The deficit was covered by issuing a record volume of increasingly expensive federal loan bonds. Putin insists that Ukraine gave up control of the Donbas under what Moscow calls the Anchorage agreements reached at the Alaska summit with Trump. Fighting would be frozen along current front lines in the southern regions of Kherson and Zaporizhia. The Kremlin sees these as concessions while Putin continues to claim all 4 Ukrainian regions, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, even though Russian forces do not fully control them, Bloomberg sources say. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump, commenting again on the peace talks, said their breakthrough is approaching.
I think they stand a chance. We've been trying. I've ended 8 wars. All of them I thought were going to be maybe tougher than this one. But Zelensky and Putin hate each other, and it makes it very difficult. But I think we're getting very close to getting a settlement. Hundreds of thousands of people, mostly soldiers, have been killed. Last week they lost 29,000 people. Last month they lost 29,000 soldiers. Can you believe that, fellas? 29,000. You lose one race driver and it's a big deal. 29,000 soldiers in 1 month. 27,000 the month before. I think that Yeah, I think that we have a good chance of getting it settled. Yeah, ma'am.
Meanwhile, Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev met on Saturday in Florida with members of US President Donald Trump's team ahead of expected round of talks in Abu Dhabi. According to Reuters sources, the names of the American participants have not been disclosed, but they are likely to include Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. It's worth noting, on February 1st, a new round of talks between Russian and Ukrainian officials is scheduled to take place in the United Arab Emirates. While Witkoff and Kushner will not be present, US participation is still possible. Meanwhile, rising tensions between the United States and Iran could threaten the success of these crucial peace talks in Abu Dhabi, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned, according to The Guardian. Rising tensions over potential US strikes on Iran are adding new uncertainty to plans for the next round of talks between senior Ukrainian and Russian officials this weekend in the United Arab Emirates. Journalists note that ahead of the meeting there has been a noticeable drop in mutual attacks by Russia and Ukraine. President Zelensky said he will see whether Russia respects the proposed pause in strikes on Ukrainian cities and energy infrastructure, emphasizing that there is currently no official ceasefire agreement between the two countries. It's worth noting that Ukraine's energy ceasefire is set to last until February 1st, according to the Washington Post. US President Donald Trump said he personally asked Vladimir Putin on Thursday not to strike Kyiv and other cities and towns for a week, and that Russian dictator agreed. Trump added that it was, I quote, very nice. However, on Friday, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed that while President Trump personally asked Putin to refrain from striking Kyiv for a week, the ceasefire actually began last weekend and will end this Sunday.
Indeed, President Trump made a personal request to President Putin in order to create favorable conditions for negotiations, to refrain from striking Kyiv for a week until February 1st.
Notably, Russia has attacked Ukraine's energy system at least twice this week, targeting facilities in Odessa region owned by the country's largest private energy company and Naftogaz facilities in western regions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the energy ceasefire began overnight on Friday, January 30th. He stressed that Ukraine is ready to respond in kind to Russian actions but will temporarily refrain from striking Russian energy infrastructure. Russia is not willing to make concessions for a peace settlement in Ukraine. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War report that the Kremlin says claims to the entire Donbas are not its only demand. Additionally, Moscow rejects the US position that territorial control over Donetsk remains the only unresolved issue in peace talks between the US, Ukraine and Russia. Analysts also note the words of Yuri Ushakov, who told a Russian state TV channel that territorial issues are the most important, but many other issues are also on the agenda.
Ushakov also stated during an interview with another state TV channel that territorial issues are the most important, but that many other issues remain on the agenda. Ushakov's comments to Russian state TV channels suggest that the Kremlin is continuing to set domestic information conditions, likely in an effort to justify Russia's refusal to make concessions for a negotiated peace settlement.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your comments below.